like your little man cave.
It is. That's what I'm kind of turning it into, / podcast studio. It's more so like my space, I think. Like, this is the place that I can go to and be like, oh, like, this is my place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't know. Your room's kind of like that, too.
Yeah.
But
you don't want to, like, work in your room, really.
Yeah.
It's, like, for sleeping.
And you get distracted. At least I do. When I'm in my room, it's like I never get anything important done.
Yeah.
Ever. It's just... I sit down at my computer and then like 30 minutes later, I'm like, oh, I achieved nothing. And now I'm sitting on my bed. So it's like, okay, maybe I do need to go somewhere. That's why it was nice to get this out of, because I did it in my parents' like living room area on the ping pong table.
Right.
And to get it out of there in here where it's a little more like, okay, we're going somewhere to do it.
Yeah.
It just added a cool element, I guess.
Nice.
But I'm so excited to sit here and talk with you. Do you want to kind of introduce yourself and say what it is that you do?
Sure. Are we recording already?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're rolling. We're live. We're going.
All right. Well, yeah, maybe just tell me what you'd like to hear about specifically.
Well, you're a nutritionist. So I guess starting there, I really found you, we kind of talked about it a little bit. I was interested in the carnivore diet, and I've been Googling nutritionists, and I came across you and was like, oh, I have to get her on to talk about nutrition in general.
Okay.
But the carnivore diet, and there are all these fad diets going around, obviously. But that one, I think, interests me because I've heard anecdotal evidence of people going on it that have autoimmune issues, deficiencies, whatever, and it helps them, which is weird because it doesn't seem like it would where you're eliminating so much from your diet.
Right.
And I don't know. I know you made a little YouTube video on that. I watched that. What are your thoughts as someone who is a nutritionist, has experience, and isn't just pulling things off the internet like I am?
Right. Well, just to clarify, I'm actually not a nutritionist. I'm a functional nutrition health coach. So nutritionist is a little bit more of it's a licensed, it's a specific credential. So I just want to be clear that I'm not a nutritionist, but I am probably just as qualified as a nutritionist with all the study that I've done. I got into health coaching because of my own health issues, which a lot of people do. I started having health problems in my mid-30s, varying degrees between 30 and 35. And then around 35, when I weaned my youngest son, all of a sudden I had a major bunch of health problems, fatigue and digestive stuff. And so I started trying to pursue, a solution. I was just like, what's going on? And then, like many of us, you fall down the Google rabbit hole and you learn about all these different things. And then I, started watching summits and watching videos and reading blogs and learning about the ways that food can make us sick. And I remember feeling like, why isn't anyone talking about this? And why hasn't my doctor heard about this? Because I did the whole exploration with doctors and they found nothing wrong with me, even though I was really sick. So I went back to school. That's what happened is I went back to school. I already had a background in health from massage therapy and was looking for a new career path after my kids were both in school. So then coming back around to your question about what are my thoughts about the carnivore diet specifically, right? That was your question?
Yeah. Well, all of that. No, that was good to know. I didn't know the background
there. Well, so carnivore, I consider the carnivore diet kind of like a diet of last resort, at least for people who are sick and looking for a therapeutic diet. It's like you touched on. It's a very extreme diet where you're removing all plant foods and you're really just left with fats and animal proteins and maybe like coffee, like a couple of random other items. And I mean, you're right, for some people who are very sick, especially with autoimmune diseases or certain kinds of health issues, they do find some relief. So, I mean, there is some interesting anecdotal evidence. There's even a little bit of clinical research on that diet, not a ton, but there is some. But my jam is digestive challenges. That's what I focus on with my clients. And I generally find that in all but the most extreme of choices and situations, the carnivore is kind of like a diet of last resort. It does seem like it's maybe more useful for people with maybe your constitution who are, just looking to optimize health and kind of go to the extreme ketogenic side of the spectrum, right? Where you're retraining your body to burn ketones rather than carbohydrates. And so, people who are kind of into fitness and bodybuilding and, dealing with insulin resistance and that kind of stuff, like the keto diet's a great option, and it can really help people lose weight and or maintain muscle mass and, be really athletic. But in the gut realm, I don't, I see people get on the carnivore diet, but then that stops working for them too, and then they can't get off of it. They can't figure out what to eat. So I have seen several situations where people end up not able to eat anything. The meat no longer is working for them either, and then they're really in a pickle. So
is it hard trying to adjust back? Because that must mess with your microbiome in your gut, because everything's gone except for those things.
Exactly. I think that's the main reason why it can have negative side effects, is because when you, like, anytime you change your diet, you're changing your gut microbiome. It's shifting the balance of the various bacteria. And you can think of your gut sort of like, it's like an ecosystem, and it has lots of different players in it and lots of different types of organisms. And, they kind of hang out in an equilibrium, but then sort of like clear cutting a forest. Like if you go in and radically change your diet, you're going to shift the balance of the organisms in there. And then you're going to select for the organisms that, help you digest what you're eating. And then you no longer have the organisms that help you digest other kinds of foods. So if you're going all the way to the extreme of carnivore, our bodies require certain beneficial bacteria to help break down carbohydrates and fibers, plant fibers, and even in some cases fats. And so when you go all the way carnivore, those organisms pretty much die off, especially the longer you're on it. And so then when you try and get back to eating a regular diet that includes plant foods, you're going to feel really horrible unless you can rehab that gut microbiome. But rehabbing it is kind of difficult, just like, you can't expect to replace a clear cut with just by planting trees. Like, you can plant those trees, but it's going to be like several generations before that forest kind of looks like an intact ecosystem with, different kinds of trees and shrubs and plants at different levels, right? And the soil is recovered. So it's sort of, I think we have to be a lot more careful about making drastic changes than a lot of us have been led to believe in the last decade.
It's crazy. For something that everybody does, which we all eat food, how many of us actually know about nutrition? I know I don't, and I eat all the time, but it's crazy. You think that people would be more well-versed in something that consumes so much of their time, like eating food does, and knowing what goes into their body and trying to optimize that to whatever degree they want to take it.
Yeah. And you would think that people in healthcare would be more on board. And I think more and more they are. But just about once a week or every couple of weeks, I hear from someone whose doctor has said to them, nutrition has nothing to do with it. It doesn't matter.
It's crazy.
And I literally can't believe it when I hear people tell me that, like gastroenterologists, especially, gut doctors who tell their patients, food has nothing to do with it. You can eat whatever you want.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I had a doctor, or my dad, his doctor actually told him not to take any multivitamins or any like supplement vitamin D or anything. She said, no, you don't need it. You're fine. Which, especially for people up here in the Pacific Northwest, vitamin D is incredibly important. Multivitamins in general are incredibly important, and fish oil and all of that. But vitamin D especially, and no, the doctor was like, no, you don't. You're fine. You're going to get that from your diet. And I'm over here thinking, I know what he eats. He's not going to get it from his diet. Right. Even if he ate, incredibly clean, the odds of him getting all the nutrients needed is so low.
Yeah, I know. To get enough vitamin D from the diet, you need to eat a lot of fatty fish and,
which how many
eggs
people are actually
and
doing
liver,
that?
you have to eat a ton of that kind of stuff. Or you can spend 20 minutes in the sun with 70% of your body exposed at midday, which, in Eureka is impossible because
it's summer right now and it's cloudy out.
It's cloudy out. We can't even do that. So, most of the people that I work with that have their vitamin D tested, if they haven't been supplementing, they're deficient. And, also the population of people I work with are they tend to be people with kind of chronic health conditions of various kinds. And vitamin D tends to be deficient in those people. And it's a little bit unclear whether it's a chicken or the egg situation, which one came first. We don't know, but we can supplement and bring that level back up pretty easily and with good benefit.
You need that.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say, so people that go on carnivore, they can kind of hit a plateau with it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, because I did keto. I only did it for a month. I don't know if I probably should have done it for like 3 just to really test it out. But I noticed obviously the first 2 weeks were pretty rough because your body's adjusting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had like a week in there where I felt pretty good, and I was weightlifting and running and doing a lot of cardio, and I felt pretty good. And then after that, it almost felt like I hit this wall where I was like stuck in 3rd gear and I couldn't get to 4th. I knew it was there, but I couldn't tap into it. But my energy was sustained. Like I wouldn't be tired throughout the day. The balance of my energy felt way more consistent than when I ate carbs.
Mm-hmm.
But I could never tap into that extra gear that I knew was there when I'd eat carbs. Mm-hmm. Like I could, if I was having a heavy lift day or running for a lot longer, like I felt like I could tap into that, and I just couldn't do that on keto.
Right. Were you testing your body to see that you were in ketosis?
I wasn't. I didn't do any of the ketone tests.
Yeah.
Which probably, I mean, if I was going to document it, that probably would have helped.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think I don't work really specifically with the keto diet anymore. I was on the keto diet for a year and a half or 2 years or something, and it turned out that it really wasn't the right thing for me. The fat content was really hard on my digestive system. So this is why I have this caveat for a lot of people, but we have to be conscientious about the pitfalls of these diets and be careful what we ask our body to do, because it can have a detrimental effect if we're not using them appropriately. But anyway, I was on the diet for some time, and my intention with it was to try and lose some weight when I first started with it. And I did. I lost, 12 or 15 pounds or something over 8 or 9 months. So, you start keto and you start to lean down.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever watched the Naked and Afraid series on TV. It's this television show where they send people out to the wilderness with nothing and they have to figure out how to eat, and they often end up fasting for extended periods of time. They all lose body weight and body mass. Anyways, it's kind of like that. Your body starts digesting any fat in your body. But then once all that's gone, it can start actually digesting your muscle tissue, and you can start to lose muscle mass as well. And so once you've gotten to your kind of plateau, you do have to kind of add some carbs back in to your threshold, and it varies what you need based largely on activity level. So if you're someone who's doing a lot of exercise or weightlifting, you're going to need more carbs than somebody who's way more sedentary. And so the reason I asked about whether you were testing your ketones, like I think the general idea is you get to that sort of plateau, and then you can start adding carbs back in limited quantities, and where you can, like, how much can I eat and still maintain the ketosis, and then still provide for my needs, so that I have the sort of cellular energy that I need to be awesome.
So you can balance it out a little bit, because I was going pretty much no carbs. I'd maybe have pretty much no carbs.
Yep.
Yeah, it was mainly just meat, cheeses.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I really did any carbs.
Yeah.
Because I thought that was, you hear like 50 grams or something is like the cutoff for the day, or whatever they have
right.
on, I don't think I did any carbs.
Yeah, and that's like a super low carb amount. And, for an average person, even somewhere between 50 and 100 is still pretty low carb. And I mean, if you can't maintain ketosis, that's a whole nother, you have to sort of figure out how to finesse that. But yeah, in most cases, I think there's like the initial phase, and then you kind of have to dial in like what feels best and what's the right thing, and how much carb do I need to add in, especially when people are doing endurance exercise or, weightlifting, running, swimming, or, if they're really physically active, it's important to...
Yeah, you feel completely different. Although I've heard of people that do... keto for like endurance sports are okay. But I think they supplement with carbs. Like I knew kids that played soccer that would do it. And then like the day of or the day before, they'd have like pasta or some rice or something just to add that element back in.
Yeah. And I actually, several months ago, 8-9 months ago, I was listening to a podcast from Dr. Ruscio. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Mm-mm.
I used to work for him on his content team, and he was interviewing this kind of famous weightlifter. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. We could look it up later, so you could put it in your show notes or something. And I was just fascinated because he's generally a very low carb ketogenic diet kind of weightlifter, and he's like this super bulky weightlifter guy.
Oh, whoa.
But he talked a lot about optimizing the timing of carbs with your workouts and like how he does it. And I was surprised how he uses carbs as part of his routine, even though he's largely in ketosis, but he does do some carb loading. And I was kind of like, oh, that was sort of the revelation for me. I was like, oh, it's not all or nothing.
Yeah, which is what it seems like when you talk to people that do it. They're like, oh no, you gotta cut it all out.
Right. Exactly.
I think what interests me about the carnivore diet is just, I mean, I kind of want to see how my body would handle it in a way, but I also like the idea of eliminating it down to just one component, which in this case would be meat, and then adding things back in to see how my body adapts. Because I would, living in America or living wherever you are, like I eat junk food. I'll have some cookies or some pasta or some things in there, and not that I view that as like, oh, you should never eat. You should never indulge. I think you should if you want to, and it's all in moderation. But just seeing how my body would handle, like what it actually can optimize and what I need to eat to really get it spinning on all cylinders or firing on all cylinders.
Right. Well, and yeah, the concept you're kind of touching on there is basically an elimination diet.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And I think, like again, it's not really my go-to elimination diet. It eliminates everything. And I find that, the sort of top 3 problem foods that I often talk about are, gluten, dairy, and sugar, including alcohol as well. And then, generally processed foods. That's like a huge one, right?
Yeah.
So if you can like move into like a real food diet and remove use one of the sort of more broad keto, elimination diets that's a little more general, like something like the Whole30, which is kind of, it's a low carb, gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, grain-free, legume-free. It's like, it's removing all the things that often inflame things for people. And then you carefully reintroduce things. It is a really wonderful opportunity to clear we call it clearing the muddy waters, and then inviting the foods back in one by one. So then you can get a clear reading of like, oh yeah, beans really don't do it for me. Like every time I eat beans, I have gas, or every time I eat dairy, I have a stomach ache, or every time I eat gluten, my joints hurt. You can, once you do that initial clearing of the muddy waters, you can really clearly see the fallout when you add that food back in. So that is a really valuable tool for health. And that's, kind of one of the major things that I help people with is that process. And I, left to our own devices, we tend to just be like, it's all or nothing. And we get on that elimination thing, and then people just keep going with it. But we end up with nutritional deficiencies, or we end up painted into a corner where we can't get out of it, or we can't go out with our friends anymore. We can't eat with our families or whatnot. So I think it's a wonderful tool, and we have to use it carefully and conscientiously.
Yeah, it's easy when you go into these diets to just be consumed by them.
Yeah.
Like if you go vegan or if you go carnivore or keto, like it just becomes all consuming, and then you're like, oh, this is my life now. Like this is it. This is who I am. I'm a carnivore. I'm a vegan.
Yeah.
And then, especially if you start seeing health ailments and you're getting worse, people don't want to attribute that to the diet. They're like, no, I'm eating, all I'm doing is plant-based. So like, I'm fine. It's got to be something else. They don't want to acknowledge, oh, well, your body needs these other nutrients that you're not really getting.
Totally. It's so ketogenic, carnivore. Yeah. I see people start to get really anxious, a lot of gut stuff with the high fat, high protein stuff. Sometimes, I know there's sort of debate about the impact on the cardiovascular system and the lipid profile, like the cholesterol, triglycerides, HDL, LDL cholesterol. But I have this client who has been on the carnivore diet for maybe 6-8 months now, and their cholesterol's like sky high, not just like a little high, but like really, really high. There's like all these things in his blood work that I'm like, this doesn't look good, And then on the flip side with the veganism, same thing, people who are just not willing to eat any animal products. And I mean, there's good reasons for people to do that. And it's like, if people feel like they have to do that for like a moral or ethical reason, that's fine. But I do often see a lot of problems there too with, deficiencies of particular vitamins, a lot of fatigue, and like longer term, it can kind of translate to like thyroid problems and, feeling cold and just lacking energy. And so there's all these pieces to it. And yeah, thankfully, some people are willing to say, well, if my body really needs it, I'm willing to invite some animal products back into my diet to round things out and give my body what it needs. But we can get very dogmatic about things.
Absolutely.
And it can cause problems.
Thyroid deficiency is a pretty common issue, right?
It is a common issue, and it's not always related to diet.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of underlying factors for that, and it's one of the most common diagnoses in America. It's the synthetic thyroid medication is the most commonly prescribed medication in America. So,
oh wow,
it's a really common thing, and there's lots of different reasons why that can happen. But yeah, I do see that commonly with people who are both vegan or carnivore. Actually, like, just the body generally is designed to eat a wider variety. Like, we're omnivores evolutionarily. We're designed to eat lots of different things to gather lots of types of nutrients.
Yeah, it's weird when you talk to somebody that doesn't believe that and they swing back into that one-sided camp, but they're like, no, we're herbivores. That's how we are. It's like the meat industry has somehow convinced people that, oh, we should be eating meat, but we don't really need to. Like, our bodies aren't adjusted to that, or vice versa with the carnivore. I've heard that before, and it's like, what? Where are we going with this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say, nobody really knows, right? But I would say that probably, we ate everything, but it was more of a punctuated equilibrium situation. Like, when there was abundant meat, we ate meat. And then in times when we didn't have meat proteins stored up or saved, or we didn't find game, then we ate plants. And, our bodies adapted and we were able to do that. And sometimes we had both. And so we ate both. I don't know. I mean, I think we're certainly designed for all of it. And I don't buy that we're only designed to eat one or the other.
Yeah.
Personally.
It paints you back into that box of, this is the camp you have to stay in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say too that there are exceptions to that. So, I think there are people that can tolerate an only animal protein diet, and there are people that can tolerate only plants. And there's this dietary theory called the maybe I won't be able to remember the type. It's like, the metabolic typing diet is what it's called. It's never really been scientifically validated, but the idea was, you took this quiz and it sort of placed you on this spectrum of, somewhere between all the way carnivore and all the way plant-based. And, if you eat right for your metabolic type, it's kind of like similar to the idea of the blood typing diet, which you've probably heard of, right?
Yeah.
Like, that you can optimize your diet this way, and that people who have done this feel amazing. And, it was the person who designed it was a friend of one of my original mentors in the nutrition space. And so, like, I took the quiz, I got the diet, I tried the diet. It didn't really help me. So I'm just one person, but I don't really see a ton of scientific validation of this theory. I think in theory it's right, but can you get people to the right box by having them take a quiz? I don't know. I think it's more valuable to allow our bodies just to give you feedback and say, okay, I feel good eating this, I don't feel good eating that, and to navigate it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about the blood work one. I just wasn't sure if that carried any weight, and it's with like where your ancestors would have been,
Yeah.
however many years ago, and what they evolved to eat in that area, correct?
That is kind of the idea. And, I've talked to people all across the spectrum, some people who say, yeah, the blood typing diet was, I did that and that was really helpful. And then I've had other people who I tried that, but it didn't really do anything for me. So, I think the people who a lot of those things work for, they kind of just get lucky.
Yeah.
It just happens to work for them. And then, but if that doesn't work for you, where you left, you have to figure out what else to do.
How do you feel about like fasting and intermittent fasting?
I think it works great for some people,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't work at all for others. Like I can't fast very long without feeling pretty bad. I don't have a ton of meat on my bones, but I find, people who have a little bit more meat on it, it seems like it generally works better for men than women on the whole, but there are some women who can do it well. So, I mean, I've seen that technique really help people who are struggling with diabetes, metabolic syndrome, heart disease. It can just kind of help them, minimize their calories, get more into the ketosis zone. I have a client right now that has been doing intermittent fasting. They eat a dinner at 6 p.m. They fast all night and eat their breakfast at like 10 or 11 in the morning. And they eat 2 meals, the sort of late morning meal and then like a regular dinner, and they're aiming for ketosis and they're losing weight, and their goal is to lose weight. So, it just really varies how it affects people, but in the right situation, I think it's a wonderful tool because it really does help resensitize your cells to insulin and allow blood sugar to get in there if you're having trouble with that, or if you're trying to lose weight. It can be really good.
I did it for a while, and I felt really good doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it's just because when you do something like that, I found myself eating cleaner just in general while doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's just, you're eating cleaner and you just happen to be fasting at the same time,
Yeah.
But I noticed, especially cognitively, I felt really good. And then I hit that first meal and, for like an hour, my body would readjust. Like, okay, now we have food in the system. And then I'd be back. But I really enjoyed it. And I really liked it's a weird feeling. And it takes a while for your body to adjust to where you're not hungry.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool also where it's like, I'm not really hungry. Like, I just want to eat. But, like, I don't actually need to eat. And having that control over your body and recognizing, okay, am I hungry or am I bored and just needing food?
Yeah, or I want something to chew on.
Yeah, just because I'm bored. Like, I think a lot of people just snack subconsciously and they're like, I've eaten all this candy, and it's like I really wasn't hungry. I was just bored, which happens. But
yeah,
I liked fasting. I need to give it another shot just to see, was it the fasting or was it the clean food?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it does have benefits for mental clarity as well, and sleep and energy, and actually another benefit of it for the digestive system, just from the gut perspective that I'm so well versed in, is the longer we fast between meals, it really just gives what's called the migrating motor complex. It's like that sort of peristalsis, that peristaltic wave of movement through the gut. The longer you fast, the more that normal action sets up, and it helps move things through the digestive system faster, more easier, and prevents stagnation of various kinds, which can eventually lead to infections of various kinds and cause all kinds of problems. So
okay, so it's that you're giving your body a little more time.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, for those that are like me that really don't understand the microgut biome, it's kind of become like pop culture now to bring it up because everybody's talking about it, but I still don't really understand how it's all. I've heard people say, it affects your mental health. It affects, how much, like you said, how much energy you have, whether you're lethargic, whether you're cognitively aware. And I like trying to put it all together in my head, but I haven't like hit anything concrete. I know it's important, and I know that your food and everything that you're eating plays an effect in it. But can you give me like the rundown of, okay, this is what's really happening?
Right. Well, so
I know it's kind of like a big topic.
It's a big topic. But that's great. Yeah. So we all have bacteria and viruses and yeasts, and even in some cases parasites that are sort of endemic to our system. And they, like I said, they have kind of like an equilibrium, like an ecology. It's sort of like a cultivated garden or a forest. You can imagine it sort of like a forest ecosystem that has lots of interrelationships, and everybody's kind of doing their thing. And then they play a really important role in our immune system, for one, and also certain types of bacteria help produce certain types of vitamins and nutrients that our body needs. So, like if we lack particular types of bacteria, we may be compromised in our ability to produce vitamin A, for example, or vitamin E, or certain nutrients. So, by way of their fermentation that they do with using plant fibers, basically, they can produce things that we need. Most of them live in the large intestine. The small intestine is a little higher up. That's the area between, the outflow of your stomach and then all the way to your large intestine. And the small intestine's not supposed to have a lot of bacteria, but it sometimes ends up with bacteria. I don't know if you've heard of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That's sort of a gut condition that can really mess people up. So yeah, the bacteria basically, they help us manufacture needed nutrients. They help maintain our gut barrier function. They are immune players, and they can, they can be helpers, or if we have the wrong kind, they can be triggering inflammation and irritating the gut and creating, allergies or allergic type reactions. Their byproducts, if we have bad bacteria, can cause a lot of symptoms and troubles. Like, just like any organisms, they make waste products just like we do. And their waste products can be inflammatory both for the gut, and once they get into the bloodstream, they can also cause problems there. So they just play a lot of really important roles in our immune system and digestion and our ability to absorb nutrients and break things down the right way. So
what you're eating feeds various types of that bacteria.
That is correct. Yeah. So on the one hand, yes, and we sometimes also eat fermented foods that provide, augmentation of those populations. What's interesting about it is that, like in terms of probiotics, like the probiotic foods that people eat, like sauerkraut, kefir, kombucha, like those kinds of things, and the supplements that most people take are usually a blend of the lactobacillus and bifidobacteria probiotics, and these are, they're like the most common types that we use, and they are super important for helping maintain the barrier function of the gut, but they don't really reside in the gut. Like we kind of need a slow kind of ongoing, dose of them to kind of keep that going. Like when we take those probiotic supplements, they don't colonize in our gut. They actually come in, they kind of hang out for a little while, and then they leave. So if we're not taking more of those in, eventually we can kind of deplete our stores of them. And
so should everyone be taking a probiotic?
Not necessarily, but, traditional cultures usually have some kind of probiotic food that they eat. Then they usually eat just a small amount with every meal. So, like a little quarter-sized dollop of sauerkraut, or a little bit of yogurt, or a little bit of sourdough bread, or a little bit of fermented drink like kombucha or ale or whatever, like something fermented. It's like usually a small supplement to the diet.
And you're just having it with each meal.
You have it with each meal, and it's just a good little dose of good stuff. Yeah.
I didn't know sourdough bread had probiotics.
Sourdough bread is fermented by a natural culture of bacteria and yeasts. Yeah.
And sourdough has the lowest gluten of any bread,
It
right?
does. It does.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, because theoretically, if it's been very well fermented, the gluten is mostly broken down by,
the process.
By the process of fermentation that's happening in it.
And does that affect the gut biome too? Is that why? Because so many people are allergic to gluten,
Yes.
it seems like now.
Yes. There are a couple of reasons for that. Like one is that like some people are what we would say, non-celiac, have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And this can often actually just be because of the type of starch, the type of carbohydrate, the fermentable carbohydrate that's in gluten is just making bacteria react. And this is like people who typically get bloated or gassy from eating gluten. That's sort of what we're looking at. But then there's also a lot of other problems with gluten, one of which is that, especially if it's not been organically grown, my understanding is that a lot of it is sprayed with
chemicals.
With Roundup, the glyphosate, to speed up the process of just drying the grain after harvest, for example. And glyphosate itself is really, really hard on the digestive system. So, it's hard to say why this recent flare of people being sensitive to gluten, but I think that's part of it. And just, it's like the low quality of gluten and the chemicals involved. So there's that. And then even the healthiest, perfect wheat and gluten, just by itself, wheat tends to increase the secretion of this protein in the gut called zonulin, which can make little tiny gaps open up between the cells of your small intestine. And so you've heard, I'm sure, of leaky gut.
Yes.
And so for all of us, no matter whether we have celiac disease or we're totally healthy, gluten does this to some degree. It's kind of on a spectrum, the degree of the effect. But gluten, no matter who you are, has that effect to some degree. So if you eat a ton of it, some people, it doesn't bother them or they don't have any noticeable side effects. So I wouldn't propose that everyone has to avoid gluten, but it is really commonly a problem for people, and we have to kind of keep an eye on that. So yeah.
So if you're trying to reset your gut microbiome and try to eliminate these things, is there a certain way you should go about doing that?
In terms of diet or other practices?
In terms of your diet. Because a lot of people eat breads and a lot of people eat pastas and legumes and stuff. Should you just cut that cold turkey if you're trying to wean that out?
I think if you don't have any symptoms or problems, you shouldn't mess with things. Okay. Honestly, I feel like if you're healthy and you feel good and you don't have digestive symptoms, leave well enough alone, because
if it isn't broke, don't fix it.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, for sure. Beyond that, if you are having symptoms and you're feeling like food might be part of it, the very simplest elimination diet is, like I was saying, just to cut out to cut out just the top 3, the gluten, dairy, and sugar for 30 days. That's like a really basic way to go about this. And then after the end of that 30 days, you can one by one add things back in and just see how you react. If you react, then okay, I tried this gluten after I haven't had it for a month and now I have a horrible stomach ache and I feel foggy headed. That's a pretty clear signal that your body's not tolerating that well. So then you could leave that behind, but then, okay, then maybe you test a bowl of yogurt and the yogurt doesn't do anything. It's like, okay, great, I can keep eating yogurt, right? You sort of test for these signs and signals from your body. And then, and if you have more complex things going on, it's important to kind of choose the right elimination diet. There's certainly the Whole30 is an option, which is sort of basically a paleo diet. There's something called the low FODMAP diet, which I use really commonly with IBS patients. Anybody with gut stuff, that's kind of the general place I start. It's low in fermentable carbohydrates. Ketogenic could be good if you're trying to lose weight and you're having the insulin sensitivity issues like we talked about. I don't know. There's like a million options.
There's a ton, yeah.
Yeah, I think, a lot of times the way these diets are sold is like, oh, this one's the right one for everyone. And I don't believe that at all. I think it's important to kind of choose the right one. So if you have a lot of symptoms, you want to kind of choose one that's in the right ballpark for what kinds of symptoms or signs you're dealing with. And that's your approach. And then I generally find that including probiotics is an important piece of gut rehab for people.
Would you recommend the pill supplement form or just yogurt?
Yeah, the fermented foods typically don't have a therapeutic dose really of probiotics. So and I usually recommend a triple probiotic protocol where you use a lactobacillus and bifido blend plus a Saccharomyces boulardii type, which is a beneficial yeast, and then a soil-based probiotic. And you sort of slowly work all these into your diet. And, again, just like with the diet, you look to see what kind of positive benefit or impact you get. If you notice nothing at all, you can, say, forget it, I don't really need that. Or if you benefit, then you can, include them and then slowly back off of them to the point where you feel like, I'm maintaining benefit, but I don't maybe need to use this super therapeutic dose in the long term, right?
And would that be like a daily supplement with that then?
Yeah, like, maximum, you're talking like 2 capsules a day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening for, you start, with approximately a month, and then reevaluate.
And see what happens.
I'm a fan of like small scale trials, try something, evaluate the outcome, and then change gears after that and see.
Which is good. That's how it should be.
That's how it should be. Yeah.
Is dairy, since dairy is one of those top 3 you said to cut out, is that a problem for a lot of people?
It is a problem for a lot of people. There's kind of 2 reasons why it can be. One is just the simple lactose intolerance. Some people lack the enzyme to digest lactose, which is the sugar in dairy products. And that's pretty easily fixable with lactase enzymes. Like I think they're called Lactate is the little enzyme pills that you can take with dairy products. So that's the easy one to fix if that's the problem. And then some people are sensitive to the proteins in dairy, which can also mimic, like they're similar to the gluten proteins. So if you're sensitive also to gluten, sometimes there's a bigger problem there and it's a little harder. Like I can't seem to get it back in my diet other than like a little tiny bit of yogurt or like, I can eat butter, but yeah, some people can't add it back in.
Does that would whole, in terms of milk, would like whole milk be better? I've heard people say that, I can't do dairy, but if it's like whole milk or not pasteurized, then it's like their body can handle it a little bit better.
Yeah, some people are able to tolerate unpasteurized milk, like raw milk, basically. Some people are able to tolerate, I don't know if you've seen the A2 milk in the grocery store. A2 is talking about the type of, there's types of protein in dairy products. So there's an A1 protein and A2 proteins, and they're kind of different depending on the breed of the dairy animals. And so like goats and certain cow varieties have more of the A2 protein versus like the Holsteins, like the standard black and white cows that we grow all over America. That everybody thinks of for milk. They have more of an A1 type milk. So some people tolerate the A2 better than the A1. And like they find if they're drinking just the A2 milk, they can tolerate it better. So now there's this new trend now where some of the dairies are selling A2 milk.
I didn't know that
separately.
Was a thing.
It's a thing.
Do food allergies, that all stems from the gut microbiome?
Yes.
For a portion.
Yes.
Because as a kid, I had a ton of food allergies. And I don't know if it's so much that I grew out of them as I got older, or I just started putting up with the symptoms, in a weird way. But yeah, like I couldn't do any dairy. I couldn't do gluten. I couldn't really do breads. I couldn't do a lot of different things. But now I eat them and I'm fine for the most. I mean, I'm walking around. I'm okay.
Yeah.
But is that common? Like, do most people grow? Is it like the peanut butter thing, right? Where, I don't know if you're familiar with that, or I've heard about peanuts and how if you introduce kids, the reason why there's so many kids with peanut allergies now is because they weren't introduced to them as kids. But if you introduce the population to peanuts and nuts as children, they'll have an allergic reaction, but they grow out of it. And the reason that's why so many kids are allergic today is because they weren't introduced as kids because parents were freaking out about it. And now we have a huge increase in peanut allergy, specifically here in the U.S.
Yeah. I don't know if I buy that theory of Genesis, but I do think allergists do have this theory of like low and slow increasing exposure to help people overcome allergies. And I think it's successful in some contexts. So it's, I think it does work in some ways and contexts, but why are people getting more food allergies? I don't know. My personal thoughts, and I don't really have data to back this up or anything. It's just sort of a theory, but I think that our environment is more more and progressively toxic. We're generally eating very poor, low quality foods, highly processed foods on the whole, soda and cereal and bread and tortillas and crackers and chips and junk food. And then even, a lot of the stuff on the shelf at the grocery store that's supposed to be kind of healthy, like a can of soup, is full of garbage, like I wouldn't eat any of it. Like something like a can of Campbell's soup is full of a lot of what I consider toxic ingredients. So I think collectively our bodies are being exposed to a lot of like this whole food system that's full of chemicals and artificial ingredients and processed foods that are affecting our gut microbiome and our immune system. And then, the air we breathe is increasingly toxic. Our water is not very clean. The clothing we wear is treated with flame retardant. Our furniture is treated with just like there's all these exposures. And, not to make people paranoid, I don't want to, sound like, oh God, we can't go anywhere and nothing's safe. But I do think that collectively all of these things add up, and that over time, we're sort of like the frog in the slowly boiling water.
Yeah.
Right. And that these are signals about that. They're signs of this wider ecosystem effect in our culture and society. And I don't know.
The chemical thing freaks me out when I think about it for too long,
Mm-hmm.
because when you really start to look at, especially with plastics,
mm-hmm.
and how,
like,
there's just so many different factors that are leaching into the food, and like clothes, like you said, just leaching into our body that we really don't understand the long-term ramifications for. We just know it's not good, but nobody seems to be alarmed enough to alter anything.
Yeah.
And I listened to a podcast a couple weeks ago with this doctor who was talking about all these phthalates that are leaching from these plastics and how they're shrinking taint sizes in the population, and how they're making people infertile and decreasing sperm counts and testosterone in both men and women. And it's crazy. It's like, why does nobody want to talk about this? And then you hear about like Monsanto products that are just being sprayed without regard across all of the food that you're eating. And it's like, what are the hormones being pumped into cows that are then slaughtered to beef them up, or probiotics or antibiotics or whatever, everything that they're sticking in. And it's like, that's what we're consuming.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like,
crazy.
It's crazy. And it's so it's diffuse. So
that's the problem, right? Is it's not just one person doing it. It's across the board.
Yeah. I was reading this article last week just the other day about climate change. And it was kind of talking about this idea of like, it's here, it's right now. We're experiencing all these heat waves and freak storms and all these things. But, the week that the heat wave was going on in the Pacific Northwest, like what were we seeing in the news? We were seeing the news about this building collapse. It's like discrete and tangible. And it's something we can really grok. We can really get it because it's so physical. But these diffuse experiences of events far flung all over the planet happening simultaneously are only affecting, people in one city or this city over here, or, parents with children with food allergies. It's like a minority, even though it's like it's increasing. It's still a very small percentage of people. And so, why is nobody talking about it? Because it's difficult to get it.
Yeah.
Right.
And how do you tackle a problem that's that widespread?
And it's really, it's difficult to understand. And then not only to understand, but to problem solve it, because it's so big and huge.
So what does your diet consist of?
People keep asking me that lately.
That's a popular question.
Yeah, it is a popular question. So I have some chronic health issues. Like, I haven't been able to quote unquote cure myself. And so I have a lot of food sensitivities that prevent me from eating an ordinary diet. I mean, I eat a lot of really wonderful, yummy things. So this is why I say we have to get in the right neighborhood too of the therapeutic diets. Like I started with the keto diet. It was completely the wrong template for me. what I've moved into is first it was paleo with rice. Paleo's grain-free. So I was eating a paleo, gluten-free, dairy-free, otherwise besides rice, grain-free diet. But I've been just trying to eat a template that matches what my body needs. So for me, that's my carbs are rice and winter squash potatoes or sweet potatoes. And my proteins are animal proteins. I can eat chicken or turkey or buffalo or fish or other seafood. And I eat a wide range of vegetables and fruits. But I kind of find that certain types of vegetables from different, like I mentioned the low FODMAP diet a little bit ago. It's like some of the high FODMAP vegetables bother me, so I avoid those. Some of the things I can't eat are high in what's called oxalates. I don't know if that's something you've
I feel like it rings a bell, but I'm not quite sure what it is.
Yeah. I mean, oxalic acid is normally present in certain kinds of foods. It's super high in things like spinach and chard, and rhubarb is a really, really high one. Also peanuts, soy, wheat, chocolate, chia, almonds, like a lot of these like health foods that a lot of people start eating when they eat a paleo diet.
Yeah, you're saying that. I'm like, oh, aren't those all like super good for you?
Those are all, and that's the thing. Like every food, with the exception of like super processed junk food, is actually good for you.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is just like, what do you tolerate, right? So, anyways, I'm sensitive to a number of those oxalate foods. Some of them, like if I eat almonds, it'll really screw up my gut and my back. So I have to avoid them. So I eat an omnivorous diet. I don't eat dairy. I avoid beef and pork because I don't feel well when I eat them. I have lately been including a little more sugar in my diet than I used to, but for a long time I was completely sugar-free. Definitely 100% gluten-free and corn-free. I can't tolerate either of those. So I can eat small amounts of legumes. So, I just sort of piece it together with what I can tolerate. It's still difficult for me to eat in a restaurant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bet.
And it's just like I was eventually diagnosed with a condition called endometriosis. And I had a surgery to remove the endometriosis, but I think that whatever underlying mechanisms were happening to drive that disease process are still there. And, I'm still working on the puzzle. I haven't figured it out for myself personally.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to just keep working on it. And diet has been a really tremendous tool for me to manage those symptoms and minimize the effects of things for myself.
Do you mind if I ask what endometriosis? I've heard it, but I don't.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not quite sure what it is.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about lady parts.
Okay.
If that's okay. So
I knew it had something to do with the reproductive.
Yeah,
system.
exactly. Yeah. So in a normal reproductive system, the lining of the uterus builds up every month and then sheds. It's called the endometrium is the lining of the uterus, and so when it sheds, that's when a woman has her period.
Mm-hmm.
So with endometriosis, material that's like the lining of the uterus is on the outside of the uterus, somewhere else in the body cavity. So it can be anywhere in that body, in the abdominal cavity. So it can be on the abdominal wall. It can be attached to the intestines. It can be attached to the bladder. It can be attached all over on the outside of the organs. And so those tissues respond to the regular hormone swings every month, just like the lining of the uterus. They sort of build up and swell, and then they shed just like the lining of the uterus, but then there's nowhere for them to go. And so that shedding of material causes inflammation and tremendous pain, and then scar tissue in the abdominal area. So it's a pretty nasty disease. And what's interesting is that about 10% of women have endometriosis, but it's still hugely underfunded for research, and many, many doctors really don't understand it, don't really treat it very well. And like 10% of women is like, it's about a number of people that have diabetes. And like think about,
which is a significant number. 10% is a high number.
Significant number of people. And like, 10%, that's like a significant number of, like diabetes, of course, has a huge amount of research and funding and, public health programs. And, every doctor is trained on how to help their patients with diabetes. But it's this kind of because it's like a women's disease, it's sort of a little bit like, oh, women are supposed to have pain with their periods, or,
It's kind of brushed aside.
it's kind of brushed aside. Yeah. And
do they know what causes it?
no, this is part of the puzzle. It's, there's some speculation that it may actually be an autoimmune disease, but that's not totally clear. I was recently reading a clinical research paper that was suggesting that it has something to do with progesterone resistance, that like body tissues are not, I don't know. And there's some speculation too that those tissues end up in that cavity as you as a fetus are developing. So there's a lot of theories. There's not a lot of really clear understanding of anything. Like, what causes it, or why has it happened, and why does it, keep going, even though like I had all of my endometriosis removed in a surgery, and but I still have symptom flares that feel as though I have disease material in my body. So it's kind of like,
oh, that's weird.
What's going on there? I don't know,
But you found some relief through your diet.
Yeah, diet definitely minimizes my symptoms. And so, I have like two kinds of clients that I help. Like one are people who make a change or a couple of changes, and we support some things, and they feel like dramatically better, and they effectively have a cure, or like symptoms are like, 80 to 90% resolved. And then people with sort of longer term chronic issues, it's more of it's often like, we're going to minimize symptoms. We're going to keep digging for root causes. We're going to keep investigating. But, like at this stage, after like 10, 15 years of this, like, I don't think I'm ever going to find a cure. I think I'm going to keep learning how to manage it. And maybe research will catch up and there'll be some breakthrough, but but diet and lifestyle practices like, sleeping enough or getting exercise, like these things can and do make a difference, even with chronic health conditions. It's kind of the best we can do in some cases.
Are a lot of the patients that come to you, are they going through doctors, through like the general system like that first, and then coming to you because they've hit the end of the road? So
yeah, I think so. There's a couple categories of people. Like a lot of people will go to their doctor first just because they have insurance, and they don't have to pay for it out of pocket. And only when they've exhausted those options and they get fed up with their doctors being like, well, I don't know, there's nothing here, then they come to see me. And then the other people I work with, of course, are the people who just in the beginning are like, I don't trust doctors, or I don't believe what doctors have to say, or I know that natural is better. So I want to work that option first before trying medications or trying to get a more formal diagnosis.
Yeah, which is a better approach. I think medications, I mean, I'm not anti-medication by any means, but I think, the less we can put into our bodies that have been manipulated in that way, the better.
Absolutely.
I say that and I would go grab an Advil, of course, if I had a headache, but
yeah.
I mean, some of the medication that they just dish out is really hard for your body. I mean, I was on antibiotics. I had an infection in my throat for a while, a couple of years ago, and they had me on antibiotics off and on for a couple months, and that just wrecks your body.
Yeah.
I mean, like I wouldn't wish that on anybody. You don't want to take meds if you don't have to.
Right.
And I think that's the first stop, especially if you go to a doctor, and it doesn't necessarily have to be all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think, certainly with infections, you do want to see your doctor.
I'm not going to go. Yeah. I'm not going to try to change my diet for the throat infection, of course.
Right. But yeah, it's true. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. And, in my line of work, it's like I work with people who are willing to make a change. So there's plenty of people out there who have health problems, but they don't want to change their diet. And
because it's hard.
It is hard.
Yeah.
And I can't help anybody who's in that boat or who's stubborn about it. But for the people who are willing to make changes and shift things, yeah, it's basically the low-hanging fruit, and it's what you have control over in your day-to-day life. It's actually really empowering to know that, okay, I'm going to figure out what I tolerate and what I can do. And, I believe it really is, 60 to 70% of our health is that management on our own time, in our own kitchen, in our own bedroom, in our own house. And then, 20 to 30% of it is like dealing with a doctor who has more expertise and can help with testing and diagnosis and maybe medication, if you need that.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, people deal with the diet and lifestyle piece and things largely clear up, or they clear up enough to the point where they're tolerable and they don't need to do anything else.
Yeah, I think for whatever reason, people have this weird disconnect between what they put into their body and how their body performs. Like you could eat, if you're eating pizza 5 days a week, and then you're like, man, I just, I don't feel good. I feel tired all the time. I think I've got something going on with me. It's like, well, maybe it's the pizza. But it's hard because, pizza especially is so good in pasta. Like all these foods that are bad for you taste amazing. And it's almost having that discipline to be like, okay, in moderation, but
Yeah.
do I really want to feel bad 30 minutes from now until I go to bed just for 5 minutes of enjoying what I'm eating on my plate? Like, is that really worth it to me?
Right. It's funny that you used the pizza example because I had a client recently who said something like that about every time I eat, I can't remember if it was pizza or bread or something, it was like every time I eat X, I feel bad. And I said to them, I was like, well, if you feel bad every time you eat it, why do you eat it? And they were like, I don't know, because it tastes good. And then, we went back to our normal whatever. And then when I saw them again, they said, gosh, I really took that to heart, what you said. And I realized that I do feel better when I don't eat that. So, just pointing that out kind of helped that person see that connection. And, that's so much of it is just helping people see those connections between their symptoms and what they're eating. And it's obscure sometimes. It's not always really obvious.
And not a lot of people talk about it. I think it's becoming more popular now to talk about nutrition, but it's still kind of under the radar. Like that's the last thing people go to is what I'm putting into my body.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd like to be able to just pop a pill and have it go how we want.
And be fine.
That would be
Keep
easier.
eating the pizza. And, I don't have any more problems anymore.
Keep eating the cake. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm glad to see that it's changing. I'm excited that people are like more focused on eating healthier and like optimizing their body, I guess, in some sense. But for some people, it's hard, and it sucks. But I think, I don't know. I think once you get past the craving phase of the foods, I think that's when you're like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
But that first, if all you're doing is eating junk food and you try to stop, then it's like, oh, I gotta get some candy or this is gonna go sideways.
Yeah. Yeah, it often requires a little bit more habit development around cooking and shopping. Trying new foods. I was talking with a person about changing their diet and I was recommending particular things and they were like, I'm sorry, I don't even know what that is. That vegetable that you're mentioning, I've never heard of that. Where do I even find that in the grocery store? So, there's that element of needing to change habits around shopping and cooking and storing food and making food and eating together with your family. These are things we're meant to do as people, but our modern lifestyles often take us away from that and have us eating on the go, eating in the car, getting fast food, just grabbing something at the gas station. And there's so many layers of that aren't healthy. It's not just like the food itself is unhealthy, but then eating in the car all squished up isn't great. Or, what was I going to say? I don't remember.
Even just scarfing down your food on your 10-minute lunch break is not good for you.
Yeah, totally not good. Or, that's what I was going to say too. Like eating alone, not sitting down with people in your life that you love, like your friends, your family, your kids, your parents, whoever, just we're designed to do that,
There's definitely a different feeling when you do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes, me personally, I go back and forth between thinking of food as like an experience, like when you go out to dinner and you're sitting around with people that you care about and you're just having a good time. And then I'll flip and it'll be like, okay, now I'm just eating, chicken and rice to try to get my body performing as well as it can. And I think it's all about finding that balance of eating things that are good for you, which is hard because they put sugar in everything.
Yeah.
And you've got things like vegetable oil or canola oil, which are not good for your body.
Right.
But how many people know that? How many people are just, cooking up their steak with oil that their body doesn't know how to process.
Right.
And you're just like, that, we should not be. I think they need to start teaching this in school at a young age. I think is the only way that we're going to get through that. Because how else, I mean, how are you supposed to know? Like, nobody ever taught me about what is good to eat and trying to figure out what your body can deal with and what it, what it kind of struggles with. And maybe, oh, this is why your stomach hurts. It's because you're eating these foods, or your body is rejecting this. And maybe we should try to stay away from that or just do it in moderation. Nobody talks about that.
It's true.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how you solve that. And I'm sure it's got to be frustrating for you on some part because you know this. And then to try to, I mean, I'm sure with your clients to just try to lean them in that way of like saying, okay, this is what we can do and it's going to help you, but we just got to get you there first.
Yeah, it is. It's tricky. And anytime you're dealing with human beings,
it's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And people are attached to their comfort foods. They're attached to their normal routines and they don't want to change things. And yet, I don't know, just as a coach, it's like, that's normal. It's normal for that to happen to people, but we always have to just bring it back to what people's goals are and to bring some of their motivation to bear. It's like, what is it that you want for yourself? Everybody's got something. They have some reason they're reaching out to me. Either they want to have energy to play with their kids or their grandkids, or they want to be able to work and do the job that they love and their symptoms are getting in the way, or they want to be able to travel freely again and they're kind of stuck at home with their symptoms, or, they want to pursue their art. There's, these are like deep inner yearnings and longings that we all have. And so that's, the human part of it is like, all of this stuff is just theory and, mechanics really about eating, but we have to have something that we're working for and working towards that we care about. Otherwise we're not willing to do anything at all.
Yeah. You got to have a goal.
Yeah.
You got to have something you're trying to reach. Otherwise, nobody's going to give up pizza just for the fun of giving up pizza. It's like, no, I mean,
you might for a week, but
and then you're going to, and then you're going to be over it. You're going to be like, no, I need pizza.
Yeah.
Is that the hardest part, is trying to get a client to like stick to the plan and like not branch off with the comfort food?
It is challenging. Or, honestly, one of the things that's harder even than that, because, people generally know that we're going to be changing some things up and, people have a hard time complying really. So that's true. But the thing that complicates it is kind of this culture of research and, the YouTube rabbit hole. And, I have clients, we get started, I have them all set up. We have a plan and it's based on, here, I've done this whole assessment of your case and I think here's what we need to focus on. And then we start it off and then they come back to me a month later and they're like, oh, well, I heard this other guy on YouTube and he said that XYZ is what I should be focusing on. So now I'm focusing on that. I'm like, wait.
We just had a good plan.
We just had a whole plan and it's really specific and personalized for you. So, it's challenging to keep people on track in that way because there's so many distractions. And there are exceptions to this, but I just generally find that a lot of people are presenting information from this perspective that this is the way to do it. And that's just it. This is true for everyone. And I just really call bullshit on that. It's not, everybody's unique and we all need a unique approach and unique specifics. And we need to customize things for ourselves. And we need to be paying very close attention to how our body's responding. We can't just blanketly say, oh, everyone should be keto. Everyone needs to quit eating carbs. Everyone needs to go carnivore. We can't say that. And so honestly, like that's one of the hardest parts for me is that part,
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
But there's so much information online. I could see that just happening all the time.
All
Someone
the
just
time.
going down a rabbit hole and be like, no, I need to go to this diet now.
All the time. Or just, well, I want to work with you, but I am going to, I don't know. I found this protocol online and I'm just going to try this protocol with no support or help. I'm just going to eat this pile of herbs every day for, and it's like, oh, okay. So you've been doing that now for how long? How's that working for you? Like, I don't know. I've seen that a lot. So, and hopefully that person will come back to me. I was just like, really? I don't think you're going to get the result you're hoping for with that.
Yeah.
Like we need to be having this conversation about like, how's your body responding? How do you properly use that tool? How do you work it in slowly? How do you stop? How do you tell if it's hurting you or not?
When your clients find you, is it people who are like towards the beginning stage, I guess, of the journey where they have like really mild symptoms? Maybe they just have like a stomach ache, or they're kind of feeling lethargic, or they don't have a lot of energy, or is it normally like more severe, like autoimmune deficiencies and they've exhausted the road?
It varies a lot,
Okay.
but I would say most people are a little more on the complex side.
That's what, because it seems like most people don't initially like, oh, my stomach hurts. It might be my food. Maybe I should go talk to somebody. Like it seems like it normally gets pushed back until the symptoms are a little worse or a little more severe.
Yeah, it's usually, they've usually been dealing with stuff for at least a couple of years. And they've already exhausted all they've been to the GI, they've had an endoscopy, a colonoscopy, they've been tested for celiac, they've been tested for various things, and it's all come up negative. And doctor's like, you have IBS. And IBS is just basically an umbrella.
It's a catch-all.
It's a catch-all umbrella. It just means you have abdominal pain and changes with your stool for 6 months or more. That's all it means.
It's really in depth.
It's pretty in depth. And, there's like a bunch of medications they might use to try and, move it one way or the other, depending on whether the person's trending toward constipation or diarrhea. But like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they have. And they don't really know how to guide people with the diet piece or this other stuff. So it's usually people around that point where they've already exhausted the GI docs, and they've maybe been to several of them even. And they're just like, why am I feeling like this? And up to, I have a new client right now who has been dealing with this stuff their whole life, and they still don't know what to do or where to go. So it kind of runs the gamut. But I would say in general, it's sort of people who are in the like 2 to 5 year zone who are like, I'm fed up with this. I don't know what to do.
Are most of them finding relief by changing their diet and taking these steps?
Well, it really varies for people, like, because there's so many variables, right? It's like, are they willing to do what I'm requesting? Sometimes we're just stuck in this loop of like, okay, here's what you should do, and they're like, okay, and then they come back and they haven't done it, so then we have to keep working on that. So those people don't tend to see too much result. The people who do change things do tend to see some positive results, and we sort of slowly work in the different layers of things that are helpful. Like I had 2 clients over the summer, or in the spring, I guess, that, one had just like chronic daily diarrhea, like could hardly leave the house. And diet was like narrowed down to just a couple of foods already. It was kind of like, what am I going to do? And we like slowly, we got all the bathroom trips kind of under control, and then slowly started rebuilding the diet for this client. And so then now they're eating basically a normal diet. And we also identified a kind of underlying infection that hadn't been dealt with. So, and we added probiotics for them. And that combination just made a huge difference, such that their gastroenterologists were like, how did you do that? So I was like, yes. And then the other client was a cancer survivor who was they were trending the other way. They were really constipated and bloated, and they couldn't figure it out. And, in my initial assessment, it turned up that the symptoms had started when they had tried to change their diet for cancer. They had read that sugar was bad, and so they stopped eating sugar and they stopped eating fruit, but then they started eating all these vegetables because they heard that fiber was really good for cancer and it was preventative for cancer. Well, they had increased all these vegetables that were high FODMAP vegetables, and so they were increasing beans and cabbage and like broccoli and all these things that are healthy foods, but in the wrong combinations weren't right. So I got her on a low FODMAP diet, and we added a couple of supplements into the picture. And, within like a month, she was like, I'm going to the bathroom regularly again. So, it just sort of, it varies for people how long it takes. The other client I was talking about it, it took us 3 months or so to kind of work them back up to a more regular diet. So that's just kind of an example of what happens. It sort of varies. And then some people we just, lately I'm having people start with stress relief as a really important part of things. Stress is very commonly an aggravator for gut stuff. And so I'm having people start with some kind of really high-powered brain balancing meditation recordings. And it's just really profound, like just dials down the knob of the symptom intensity for people in the beginning. And then then it's sort of clear that like, oh, a huge part of this is my stress about these symptoms and freaking out and wanting them to be different. But if I just turn the dial down, then I can calm down about that. And then I can focus my attention on the remaining symptoms. So
that's a real thing, right? The brain is so crazy, but the fact that you can like manifest systems in your own body, like it sounds crazy when you say it, but then it's a real thing. And there are people that, their symptoms are all psychosomatic, but they cause real detriment to their lives.
I wouldn't say that they're all psychosomatic. I think some of them are real, but then you can just, it runs away with itself. Like your anxiety about the symptoms then
drives it
out of control and makes it even worse. I also find that a significant number of people that come to me with gut stuff have some background of trauma. They have some kind of grief, loss, sexual trauma, abuse trauma, substance abusing parents or, mentors or people in their life. So like there's a lot of that. And so it's a pretty interesting overlap.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
In my mind. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard of adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs score. Have you ever heard of this?
I think I've heard of the acronym, yes.
Yeah. I mean, basically just that adverse childhood experiences produce lifelong negative impacts on people. And it makes intuitive sense, but it's been quantified in all this research. So people who grow up with parents who are verbally or physically abusive, sexually abusive, they've been sexually abused, they grew up in a house where parents were abusing drugs or alcohol, grew up in a household where one or both parents were incarcerated. These people have significantly higher risk level for autoimmune diseases and chronic diseases of all kinds.
Oh, wow.
Like not just like a little bit of an increase, but like a really significant increase in risk for chronic diseases and health problems.
That's crazy.
It's totally crazy. So it's kind of like if we could handle that kind of poverty and the kinds of social situations that lead to some of these problems and handle, poverty, abuse, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, like we could dramatically improve the health of the next generation.
God, that is so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I almost don't even know what to say because it seems like there are so many things that tie back into your experiences and what you undergo as a child and how that really just has this ripple effect through the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And it's like, that you say that and it's like, yeah, that makes sense. But then you start, tacking on things like this or tacking on things like the homelessness problem and all the stressors and, pre-indicators for that. And it ties back into childhood abuse. And it's like, where, what happens to these kids and what happens to you at a young age really sets you up for the rest of your life. And I'm someone that likes to, I like the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. I think that gets shit on a lot nowadays. And there are some things wrong with it. But I like the idea of you putting your head down and just, working on yourself and trying to better yourself. Because I think a lot of people nowadays, they want to, point at the problem or pass the blame. And they don't want to recognize, okay, I had some part in this. Mm-hmm. But in a weird way, the more I talk to people like you and the more I start delving outside of, what I'm familiar with into these other zones, I realize, man, so much of it is what is inflicted on you when you're a kid and what you absorb because you're just like a sponge. I mean, you're taking in all these external factors and it can set you up really well and you can, it can set a great foundation for the rest of your life or it can really mess you up. And I think hearing that, man, that just struck a chord. That's crazy.
It's crazy. And And, the sort of physiological mechanism behind it is really this idea about the nervous system and how the nervous system gets wired, the brain and the nervous system. And so if you're a child and you're constantly living in an environment where you're experiencing threats to your safety, your survival, or your feeling of personal safety, you're always on guard. You're always, you sleep with one ear or one eye open. And this leaves you kind of in a position where you are constantly on edge. And that constant vigilance leaves you exhausted and, is read by the body as just like threat and stress. And so that can translate in all these other ways downstream in your life where, you can't relax or you don't stay with partners long or you're just very vulnerable to all kinds of things. And maybe if your parents are kind of messed up, like you don't have a safety net either. Once you become an adult, you don't have a place to go
Yeah.
if you, lose your job or run out of money or get
There's
sick.
nobody there to catch you.
There's nobody there to catch you. So, and it literally sets the brain up in a pattern where it can't balance itself very easily. It's vulnerable. And then you add any kind of stress or whatnot onto that situation, it can really derail people. So yeah, I had a client a while back who grew up with a parent who was kind of absent and kind of focused on their own thing, and they were homeless a lot growing up, and they moved around a lot, and just all these kinds of intense situations. And growing up, they never felt secure or safe, and they were hungry a lot too. So, and this person now has chronic health problems, and they're trying to hold it together for their kid, but it's like hard, and it's just interesting to me. I see it over and over and over again, over and over and over.
That's so unfortunate.
I know it is. And so, yeah, I'm bringing this nervous system balancing piece in with the work too, because we have to address it. It's like the elephant in the room that sets people up for this whole thing.
Do you feel like a lot of people are addressing that, or this is like a new revelation?
I mean, in my practitioner community, I'm starting to hear a lot of people talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's talked about in a lot of different ways, but I wouldn't say it's mainstream yet.
Yeah, because I mean, not that I'm in that community or anything, but that's the first I've heard about that extent or that side of it,
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting online programs that are designed to help people with this problem. And, I've seen it have profound effects for some people. And I think it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. And it's almost like, soldiers, they go off to war and you're living in this high stress environment and your body's at 10 for months and months, if not years on end. And then you come back and your body's just wrecked because that's not a sustainable, that heightened level of just being on edge is not, it's not sustainable for your body. Your body wasn't designed to be at a 10 constantly.
No. And you witness gruesome things and horrible things, and it
just weighs on you.
Yeah.
And as a child, I mean, experiencing that in a rough household would almost be like amplifying it by 10 or 20.
Right. You don't even have any way to make any sense of that whatsoever.
And you don't really understand what's happening because you're a kid.
Totally.
And if that's all that you've been, subjected to, that's all you know. I mean, where do you go from there?
Exactly.
Wow. I feel like my mind is blown. I mean, that is so sad. I would not have thought that. I mean, it makes sense. Your mind plays a role in everything. And so the fact that would tie into your stress would tie into your gut microbiome. I mean, it's like, duh, why did you not think about that in a way, I almost feel like, why am I so blown away? But I wouldn't have thought,
Well, there's kind of just the physiology of it too, is that, there's a nerve superhighway between the brain and the gut. So it's called the vagus nerve, which maybe you've heard about in your various researches, but the vagus nerve is it's actually, we sort of think about, oh, the brain is the big controller and it sends messages throughout the body, but the gut also communicates back to the brain. And so that, when you get, nervous about something, you have butterflies in your stomach and you feel like you get like a stomach ache. You're going to have to go do public speaking or go do something new that you're nervous about or go on a first date or whatever. You're kind of like, that's the vagus nerve communicating, and it can impact the gut microbiome, and whatever the gut microbiome is doing, if it's really out of control and there's lots of infections or things going on, that can also influence the brain and the brain chemistry and your mood as well. Like a lot of people with gut problems report things like brain fog, depression, anxiety, insomnia, these kinds of.
That's a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mental health and your diet
absolutely
is a huge factor. And again, more people are talking about it now, but that was almost like too taboo in a weird way where people didn't want to touch on that.
Yeah.
It was like, no, you have to take meds to cure depression or to cure bipolar. You can't do that with diet and with exercise. Whenever I bring up exercise, people will be like, no, you can't say that. Like, people need to take their meds. But it's like, no, you could alter your diet and go take a walk or do some physical exercise, and it might help. It might not help you. You might have to take medication, but it might help.
It does help.
I mean, and it's worth trying, if nothing else.
I have lived with anxiety and depression my whole adult life, and I have not medicated myself. I've very consciously not medicated myself. I've at times been almost open to it, when symptoms were bad, and I've taken more of a lifestyle and nutrition approach, and I have it mostly under control. Like when stress gets worse, then maybe I start to have more problems, but it's absolutely possible. And, if people feel like they want to take medication, I certainly don't, have any judgment about that. But I do know that, we can do a lot with nutrition and supplements, and, exercise is certainly one of them. Sleep, getting enough sleep is huge.
Not staring at your phone until 4 a.m. That's a big one.
Totally. Yeah, all of those things. And
that's one of the things that, tying back into the whole medication thing, that's what bugs me about that is these people, as soon as you say, oh, I have depression or I think I have anxiety, it's like the meds just start flowing.
Yeah,
and it's like there's steps. Not that is a bad thing. I think if they help you, that's fantastic. I don't want to discourage people from taking those medications.
Yeah.
But I think the first step should be trying to alter these other factors in your life that are going to have a smaller effect, exercise, diet, sleep, what you're consuming in your life, content wise with your TV and with social media, changing these things and just seeing if it has any tangible effect before we go down the path of meds.
Definitely. There's a really interesting clinical psychologist that has been working in this sort of functional medicine, gut brain space. Her name's Kelly Brogan. So if you haven't ever checked her work out,
I'll have to check her out.
She wrote a really amazing book called, I believe it's called Change Your Mind, How to Change Your Mind. She basically stopped prescribing psychiatric meds to her patients because she did a deep dive in the research herself and found that there basically was almost no research supporting their use. Like they basically were no better than placebo or just slightly better than a placebo.
Oh, wow.
And she also went through a period of time where she was having some mental health challenges and, felt like I'm not really sick. Like I have to, so she's an interesting person and has been doing some really interesting work over the last 5 to 10 years or so on this topic. And, really works to help people resolve their depression and anxiety without medication.
I will have to check out that book. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So I have to ask, what you said you went through some additional schooling to be a nutritional health coach, right?
Yeah.
What is the difference between that and a nutritionist? Because you sound incredibly well versed. I'm sitting here talking to you like, wait, okay, I gotta.
Yeah, well, you remember when I said I think I'm just as qualified,
probably. At face value, I would say yes.
But, so I'm not sure what's involved in becoming a certified nutritionist or dietitian. I think there's college coursework. Basically, it's like a 4-year degree or maybe a 2-year degree. I'm not exactly sure about the requirements. the training that I did was I did a whole year program that was in health coaching. So that's the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. That's sort of like probably the most well-known health coach training right now in America. There's lots of others, but that's the kind of the big one. It's based in New York. And then I also, simultaneous to that, did a program called Functional Diagnostic Nutrition that trained me in how to use several functional medicine lab tests. So gut microbiome testing and SIBO testing. We looked at organic acids testing and hormone testing and stuff like that. So that was like a deep dive training into those things and sort of the physiology behind what you're trying to impact there. And then I did a whole year training in this program called Full Body Systems. That's with the Functional Nutrition Alliance. They're based in Portland, Oregon. And they really just provided this missing piece for me, which was a deep dive into the physiology of food and diet and lifestyle. So, it's like a deep dive into the main systems of the body through a whole year. And it's really fascinating. And it's so important to understand how nutrients, vitamins, minerals, foods, diets affect the physiology. I mean, that's like we have to be able to read what things are doing for our clients in their bodies rather than just, like I see a lot of the green people that have gone through some of these other trainings, they're like, oh, I have my first client and they have this, this, and this. Should I give them this diet or that diet? I'm like, if you're asking that question, you shouldn't be working with clients yet. Like you have to have some idea of what you're trying to do. So, anyways, and then I was able to do a mentorship with the main mentor in that school, Andrea Nakayama, for another 6 or 9 months or something like that, where it's sort of like a mastermind group where we just deep dive. But what was interesting is we didn't do more physiology in that, although we had a little of that, but it was more about the art and science of empathy and practice and like how to really meet people where they are and help them make changes. So it was sort of like advanced work really in coaching and more information isn't always what's needed for people. It's really more often about building relationships and helping them connect with their body and figure out sustainable ways to make changes that are going to work for them.
Yeah.
Regardless of what I think they should do or how I think they should do it. It's sort of the question is, so often becomes more like, what are you, what do you think you could do? Or, what do you think you could change?
It's almost like bringing them into the process.
Absolutely.
Instead of excluding them and just telling them, this is what you have to do. Here are the steps.
Exactly.
You're almost making them semi-accountable with you.
It's really about a partnership.
Yeah.
And really medical care should be like this. The best doctors, I don't know if you've spent much time with doctors, but the best doctors are the ones who are willing to work with you. I work with, personally, from my own health issues, I work with Dr. Peachy at North Coast Naturopathic Medicine in McKinleyville. And, we have a really good partnership. And, I go to her with things that are going on and I say, what do you think? And she says, I think we should do this. And I say, okay, well, I'm not so comfortable with that, but what about this? And so, we just have a conversation about it. Or I'll come to her and say, oh, I'm thinking about this thing because this is what I've observed. What do you think about that? Could we try this? And she's like, sure, we can try that. So, that partnership is where the magic happens. And without it, we can't really get anywhere.
Yeah, it's incredibly important.
Yeah.
You would think that medicine would, it should be that way.
Mm-hmm.
It should be a more preventative approach.
Right.
But it's more, we've got the Band-Aid, so let's just wait for something to happen and then we'll deal with it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that's why, a majority of the country is obese and has all these health ailments is because we're waiting for the injury to happen so we can fix it instead of dealing with the issues leading up to it.
Absolutely.
That sounds fascinating. So you went through a lot of schooling for this and you got a mentorship program.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I'm sitting across from you, she is you, it's easy to tell what you're talking about. I'm like, okay, I'm just trying to keep up over here. So I felt like I had to ask because I don't know what goes into being a nutritionist either, but
yeah.
You definitely sound qualified to speak on everything you've spoken on.
Yeah, I have some gaps in my knowledge and there's certain health conditions that I don't work with. So I just really am not well versed in them. When somebody comes to me and they're like, I want to lose weight, I'm not a specialist in that. I refer those people to other people, but anything to do with the gut, I'm like there.
That's right up my alley.
That's right up my alley. And, to some degree, autoimmune conditions, I've really thought a lot about that and studied it. And the gut is so important to autoimmune disease. It's a really huge piece of dealing with it and addressing it. So
did you go into it focusing on the gut microbiome, or is that something you kind of found along the path?
No, it's really like the first thing that we talked about in full body systems, and just we discussed how important it is and all the different, of course, functions that it performs in our body. But I think the gut focus largely came out of my own health issues, because so much of my symptoms were centered around my digestive system. And so it's kind of, I've just deep dived there because that's what I needed to try and learn more about my condition and what I could do for it. And so it's just where I've studied and learned the most. So, yeah. And I also, like I mentioned, I've struggled with anxiety and depression. Like when I first started, I thought that was where I wanted to focus was with anxiety and depression. But then I found that people in that boat often were, they weren't really in a good place to make changes. Like they were just struggling with the anxiety and whatnot. It just wasn't the right niche for me. But nowadays I'm finding that I am now getting more clients who have both, who have gut challenges and anxiety. And I just feel like I can speak to them really well because it's my story too, It's like anxiety. It's like gut stuff compounded by anxiety, compounded by trauma, like all these things. They're all part of my story. So,
which is, it's almost invaluable having that, because you are well versed and you do have this story, and being able to relate to clients coming in. You can't beat that.
Mm-mm.
Like having someone that's been in your shoes and it's like, okay, I know where you are and I know it can get better. So let's do it. I'm here to help.
Totally.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. We all have our own unique magic that we are uniquely qualified for because of our own life experience. So we start there.
There you go. Did you start the YouTube videos then to try to help disseminate some of this information, or where did that come into play?
Well, I've been certified as a health coach now. I think I got certified in 2016. So that's 5 years ago at the end of June. So yeah, it's been just about 5 years. And for the first 3 years, I just had a really hard time finding people to work with. I don't know. I needed a way to reach more people. And so the YouTube strategy was just about trying to meet potential clients and just get my message out there and let people, see me and see, yeah, here's all the stuff I know about and here's things I can help you with. And it's been a really slow build, but it's kind of ramping up. And I'm in this last 6 months, I've just built a new online course. And so that's kind of the direction things are going. And YouTube is going to be a major part of getting the message out there about that and finding people to support. So, but yeah, it's a wonderful, now that I'm doing it, it's like a wonderful way to share information. And, every single day I hear from people who, like, oh, I have this problem. Thank you so much for this video. Or,
oh, that's awesome.
It's really fun to connect with people, because for a couple of years it was like, I have so much to offer and I just desperately want to help people and I can't find anybody to work with. And it's not that I'm no good. It's just, I live in a very remote place and I don't live in a town. I can't just sort of go network with people. And so I had to find another way to get my message out there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you have the knowledge. It's almost just finding the audience, because they're out there. You just got to connect with them.
Totally.
This course, is it like a coaching course, or you're just working through what you normally would work with them on an online
course that I'm working on with people?
Yeah.
Well, it's called the Calm Digestion Method, and it's an 8-week program just to help people, do the, address the nervous system, like set up some habits around that. It's also about doing the proper assessments to decide, like we've been talking about, like what is the right diet to start with, or where do you start, and what are the right things, or what are the things that are total rabbit holes that like I can't tell you how many people come to me talking about the medical medium and how I'm following the medical mediums thing. I don't know if you've heard of the medical
Mm-mm.
medium. He wrote this book several years ago, and basically it was like, everyone who's got chronic illness has chronic Epstein-Barr virus, and everybody should be juicing celery, and everybody should be vegan. And, it was one of these everybody should things. And I even tried it, like before it was like knew any better. And I don't know. It's like, anyways. So, I help people narrow, just sort of get into the right neighborhood of choices so that they're not wasting a lot of extra time and they're kind of focusing in the better area or the best area for them. And then I teach people how to make these changes the right way so that, you're just changing one thing at a time, and you're, and how to read what their body's telling them. So it's sort of a comprehensive program to talk through all of that. And then it includes coaching that, basically the coaching's included on an ongoing basis beyond the training itself. So that's sort of what I'm building. It's
that's cool.
Still a work in progress. Yeah.
Oh man, and it's not out yet.
Well, I'm running the prototype right now.
Okay.
I've got a group of 7 students that we're working through it, and so we'll see what kind of feedback I get and how I need to upgrade it.
Oh
after
wow,
that.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So you're in the building stages, kind of putting that out there. That's fantastic. I think having more resources like that, again, from reliable sources is the key, because there's so much information out there that you watch and you're like, yeah, you should juice for 30 days and like that's all you need. It's gonna change your life. And you're like, what is happening right now? You shouldn't eat anything but just kale. Okay, well, we need to figure this out.
Yeah.
But that's the YouTube wormhole that you get sucked down, and people just lose it, and then you're carnivore for 6 months, or you're vegan for 6 months. You're like, nothing's working.
Yeah.
And you fall into that pit of despair.
Yeah. Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited for that to come out. I
Yeah.
hope that everything pans out with that.
Thanks. Yeah.
We just did an hour and a half. I don't want to keep your son out in
Yeah,
the car
no,
waiting any longer. I just looked at the time and was like, oh no. Hopefully he fell asleep or he's playing on his phone to keep him busy.
Totally.
Do you have anything you want to plug? Your YouTube videos where people can find you?
Well, yeah. Certainly, anyone who's interested to, find out, to basically apply for the next round of the program can go to my website, which is just confluencenutrition.com/contact. There's information there about applying for a seat in the next round of the program. And my YouTube channel is Confluence Nutrition. So it's just youtube.com/Confluence Nutrition. And I think I have over 80 videos over there on all kinds of digestive topics. So, everything from probiotics to diets and histamine diets and low oxalate diets. And I have a recent video I put up there that was a live training I gave. I think it's titled How to Tame Unpredictable Bloating, Constipation, and Diarrhea. And that's a little bit more of an overview of, what I teach. So that's kind of a good one for people to go check out.
To dip their toe in. Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, YouTube is a great place to go connect with me. And
80 videos. They're going to have plenty to
have fun
to dive into. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Amanda, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed sitting down and talking with you. I feel like I definitely need to dig in more into nutrition for sure, because it's one of those areas where I have like a surface level of understanding of like what's good and what's bad, but I definitely want to dive deeper, and I think this was a great introduction. I hope people pull something from that.
Yeah, I hope so too. And thank you so much for having me and,
my
reaching
pleasure.
out. It was so fun to get that email from you initially, like, hey, come on my podcast. Okay.
I know. I have been waiting forever. I've been looking forward to this since we first talked. I was really excited to sit down and talk with you.
Nice. Well, it's my pleasure to meet you, and hello to your audience. And I look forward to meeting some of them too, maybe.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.